I just dropped my wife, Elsbeth Tipton, off at the airport early Saturday morning. It was a sunny day, which made me wander from object to object instead of concentrating as usual. Elsbeth takes up most of my gray matter. She recently turned 40, and I, Blake Tipton, was only 35, which seems to have affected her more than I thought. Turning 40 is obviously a big milestone for her, but she didn't seem to enjoy the 40th birthday party I threw for her. His 40th birthday means nothing to me, except future children, more on that later. I firmly believe that age is just a number. If I had thought differently 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have married a woman 5 years older than me. But that doesn't bother me at all. Elsbeth visited two sisters and their families who lived more than 700 miles away. He said he needed a week after my birthday to clear his head. "Honey, not only am I 40 years old," she told me a few days ago, "but I need to rethink my career goals, and I really miss Eleanor, Eva, and their family." I had no problems with the trip and did everything I could to make it easier. I was a little worried when she was debating whether to buy a plane ticket or get off at the airport, and even more worried when last night she looked more like a blow-up doll than a wild doll. The cat, as always, but this happened due to stress. My thoughts also revolved around the slight weight loss that Elsbeth has experienced in recent months. This was not a sign of a serious illness, but it still bothered me. As far as I know, Elsbeth used to weigh between 139 and 141 pounds, and in the last few months she has dropped to 134 or 135 pounds. Looks better at 140. I was also bothered by Elsbeth's apparent reluctance to start a family. I was definitely ready to have at least a few lovely children when we got married, but it was only a matter of time, and I know that first pregnancy after 40 is usually not so easy. While I was driving, I decided to ask him to say when, a few days after he returned from his trip. Most of the other things I think are important to me, but they're not important to this story, so I won't bore you with them. But most of all, I didn't want to miss such a wonderful day. I hadn't gone hiking in a while and decided that a solo hike would suit me just as well as Elsbeth. Look at his sisters. That's when I decided to go hiking in the nearby mountains. Rangers recently warned residents, especially women, not to walk on certain roads due to several incidents, including rape, and serial offenders have yet to be arrested. However, I was too big, too strong, and too stupid to be afraid. I haven't been afraid of anything physical since I was 12, so it didn't make sense to me. My house was 3 miles from the difficult mountain trail I wanted to hike, so I stopped and filled my backpack with food, 3 insulated metal bottles of ice water, an extra t-shirt and long-sleeved shirt, a knife, and a knife, a flashlight, although I wanted to get home before dark, and some other little things. I put on my hiking boots, tossed my backpack on the passenger seat, and headed toward the trail. On a Saturday morning in early fall, there were fewer cars in the parking lot than usual, perhaps because of a warning about a serial rapist. However, I walked quickly and enjoyed the silence, the singing of birds, the rustling of the treetops, and the beauty of the landscape. After walking a few kilometers, I stopped for about 20 minutes, ate a few energy bars, drank a liter of still water, and continued walking. Instead of continuing on the main road, I turned onto a lightly trafficked country road that ended at a cliff about 2 kilometers away and continued at a good pace. About 15 minutes after my lunch break, I heard a low, painful noise on my right side. He always walked quickly in the direction of the sound with curiosity, but without any sense of fear. Less than 50 yards from the road, I saw 2 bodies lying on the ground. The man upstairs allegedly threatened the naked woman below with a knife. I didn't hesitate for a second. As I ran, I dropped my backpack and hit the guy before he saw me. He was just starting to turn his head when he heard the sound of a 230-pound bull breaking through the bushes when I kicked him in the right temple. I think my foot hits the ground so hard that if it were a football, I could kick it 60 yards. Despite this, he flew away from the woman and remained motionless a few meters away from her. I was about to step on him when I saw that he was passed out, and holding the knife out of reach turned my attention to his victim. The topless woman looked scared. Her jean shorts were unbuttoned but not removed, her hair tangled in leaves. I made sure the rapist didn't move and then took care of her. I give her my hand. "Do you agree?" I felt like a pervert, looking not at her face but at her breasts. I'm generally a man who has an eye for women's legs and butts. My wife has both, and that's what attracted me to her in the first place. But I'm a normal guy, that's obvious. I admire beautiful breasts. And these were the most beautiful breasts I have ever seen in my life. They weren't huge, but they were slender and sat on her chest with long, perfect nipples. The woman was confused. But she took my hand and I lifted her up. She trembled in my arms, but after talking quietly to her, I calmed her down. I swear I didn't mean it that way, but as I held her shoulders to calm her down, I couldn't help but admire her perfect breasts for a long moment. When he seemed to come to his senses, although there were tears in his eyes, I said, "Let me give you a shirt." It must be said that her top and bra, lying on the floor near the chaise longue, seemed useless. I let go of her for a few seconds, grabbed my backpack, pulled out an extra t-shirt and a long-sleeve shirt and handed them to her. I touched her breasts again as I still couldn't cover them. Shock. "I'm a little cold. Can I wear long sleeves?" he said after a few seconds. I removed the leaves from her sides and back and helped her put on my shirt. Since I'm 6'2" and 220 pounds and she's 5'7" and 100 pounds, my shirt automatically looks like the skirt she's wearing. Luckily, the dress had a relatively small neckline, so it completely covered her breasts. But she had to roll up the sleeves because they stuck out almost a foot. After making sure she was okay, including buttoning her jean shorts, I sat her down on a nearby rock. I felt like I was picking up things that she had scattered all over the place. After gathering all the things, including her strapless bra and blouse, and putting them in her small backpack, I knelt down next to her and gave her a drink from one of my bottles. I didn't ask him what happened because it was obvious. I spoke to her tenderly, mainly assuring her that she was now completely safe, and asking her to tell me when she wanted to return to her starting point. After about 15 minutes, he looked at his attacker and asked, without worry in his voice, just with curiosity, "Is he dead?" "I have no idea. While I'm sure it's not a threat, I'm just worried about you. I'll check it now." I approached the rapist and found that he matched the physical description of a serial rapist that other victims had provided to authorities. I made sure the knife was out of reach, then knelt down and felt his pulse. He must be dead. Then I had to decide what to do, besides helping the victim. I approach her. "I didn't introduce myself. My name is Blake. Who are you?" "Rachel. Rachel Weber," he replied, taking my outstretched hand. "It's okay, Rachel. The attacker is dead. Apparently I killed him. Now we need to decide what to do." "In the end, I'll do what you want, but let me give you my first thoughts and then you can talk, okay?" "Of course," he said, and then added solemnly, "I'm glad he's dead." "Me too, because I'm convinced he's a serial rapist." This seemed to raise Rachel's eyebrows. Then I continued, "I'd prefer it stay that way." By taking his pulse, I had erased all traces of DNA from his body, and there was no other evidence that I had touched him, as I had only touched the toe of the shoe I had come into contact with. "I'm afraid it contains your DNA. How did this affect you?" Rachel was hesitant to answer, but eventually did. But she was too traumatized to tell me much. I decided that something needed to be done with the body, but neither Rachel nor I was there. After a few minutes of thinking and talking, I said, "Let me look around." I left the crime scene in the opposite direction of the trail and came out onto a ledge about 100 meters further. There was about 40 feet between the edge and the fairly deep stream below. If he had thrown the rapist off the cliff into the creek, all trace of Rachel would likely have disappeared in a matter of days. I went back to Rachel and explained my plan, and that I wanted her shirt. At the same time, I grabbed the rapist by the legs, dragged him to the windowsill, and threw him face down into the river. It hit the spot, and the beam was deep enough to completely cover his body, although he could still be seen. Rachel reached into her plunging bra, grabbed the knife, and handed it to me. I threw the knife. Maybe it was washed downstream, or maybe not, because it ended up upstream from the body. "Let me tear your clothes." "Looks tempting," she replied shyly as I stuffed my torn bra and blouse into my backpack. When we returned to the scene, Rachel began to sob quietly. I put her back on the rock and held her until she stopped. She gently pushed me. "I'm fine. Let's go." When we reached the main trail, I slowed down to make sure no one was there and followed it to the trailhead. On the way home, I casually talked to her, hoping to distract her from the pain. I found her to be a very resilient woman, and after about half an hour, her behavior became almost normal, although I think she may need counseling in the future. I finally plucked up the courage to ask her why she went hiking alone when the rangers were warning about serial rapists. "I come from another city. I came here on business and had to stay for the weekend, so I didn't notice the warning, and I love nature. I guess I should have been more careful anyway." "Don't worry," I replied. "You will be able to walk along the forest path without fear. You haven't done anything wrong." In the roughly 2 hours it took us to get to our starting point, we learned a lot about each other, including that she was 29 years old, turning 30, married, childless, and working as a cook. When we arrived at the trailhead, their rental car was parked just 2 spaces away from mine, but I was still surprised to see how empty the parking lot was on this beautiful early fall day. When we reached the starting point of the route, I squeezed her shoulders and looked at her seriously. Listen, Raquel, I recommend that you go to a psychologist with whom you have a trusting relationship and talk about your experience. It may take you a while to wake up, but in just over 3 hours of getting to know me, I have discovered that you are very resilient and quite persistent. Thank you, Blake. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. Tears appeared in his eyes. I know how grateful you are, Rachel, and all I can say is that it was an honor to help you. It's probably the best thing I've ever done, and I'm glad to know I was helpful. Then, after a pause, I continued. One thing. Remember, do not report this to the authorities. 2 days later, I anonymously called authorities from a payphone and told them where they could find the body of a serial rapist. I hope that the public is no longer afraid and that all traces we have during this time will be erased. Raquel looked at me. The sun was shining on her, and although I soon realized that she was a pretty woman, it was only then that I realized that she was more than pretty. She was exotic. Where should I return your shirt, Blake? I'll have to wear it until I get back to the hotel, but I'm glad it's back. Keep it. Throw it away if it brings back bad memories. But you can use it every time you want to wear something 6 sizes too big. I answered with a smile. Okay, she replied with a smile. Good luck, Rachel, I said, kissing her head, then turned and opened the car door. As soon as I got behind the wheel and fastened my seatbelt, she knocked on the car window. I want to invite you to dinner to express my gratitude, he said with a smile. Looking at her beautiful face and thinking about her perfect breasts now peeking out from under her shirt, I thought, the temptation is too great. So I politely declined and told her that she wouldn't be grateful anymore and that he had others too. Plan. Have. Then he surprised me one last time. What do you think about my naked breasts? Your eyes almost pop out of their sockets when you look at them, as if you think there's something wrong with them. I know I instantly blushed. Before I could come up with a reasonable answer, I blurted out, They are the most beautiful people I have ever seen in my life. Seeing his evil smile, I felt even more embarrassed and left unceremoniously. For the next half hour, I cursed myself for being a pervert, for looking at her naked breasts, for answering her questions. Eventually, I realized I couldn't go back there, so I sighed and headed home, stopping only at the nearest supermarket to throw her ruined top and bra in the bin. That evening, I called Elsbeth, talked to her, her 2 sisters and 5 children, bought food for dinner, and went to bed early. I was tired and immediately fell asleep. Unfortunately, I woke up in a cold sweat from a deep sleep, just in time to see my hard cock automatically approaching. Should I strangle you? I groaned, stood up, wiped the remaining cum on the sheets with a towel, and then rolled to the other side of the bed. The clock showed 3:08. I blamed myself for having the most realistic dream of my life, and finally fell asleep again. The next day, Sunday, I felt full of energy, despite the disturbed night's sleep. I solved a few riddles in the newspaper, cooked myself a nice breakfast, did an intense strength training session, biked 2 miles, and took an afternoon shower wearing only gym shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. I was finishing the paperwork when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I couldn't believe who rang the doorbell, the same person who had called me the night before. Rachel Weber. Rachel, I greeted in shock. What are you doing here? How do you know where I live? I know where you live because I have your registration number and I have an employee who can decipher it. She found it easily thanks to the license plate. But I must add that you are smart and never told me who I am. Tell me your last name. I'm here to return the shirt. Thank you again. And another reason. Can I come in? Actually, I don't want Rachel to come. The revealing top showed off her perky breasts, while the shorts clearly showed off her toned legs. But being the gentleman I am, I replied, Of course, sorry, please come in. I took Rachel into the living room, and taking the shirt, she said, Sorry, I didn't have the opportunity to wash it at the hotel. He probably smelled the same as me, as if the presence of his scent was something negative. No problem, I replied. What would you like to drink? Sure, but don't go too far, she replied. I just wanted to buy a can of soda, Rachel. I'm fine with that, Blake. While we drank soda, we started talking about the weather, how he liked our city, the restaurants he ate at last week, and other places we hadn't seen anything. He thanked me again and said, Another reason to come. I looked at her doubtfully. I'm here for treatment. So? I asked, completely embarrassed. I had nightmares at night. Instead, I had one of the most powerful, realistic, and wonderful dreams I have ever had. In fact, I cried, that's a good sign, isn't it? If this dream hadn't given me pause, I would have taken it as a good sign. Last night, I was searching the internet for information about other victims of what the media is calling a rapist. All of them were seriously injured and raped. One of them is still in hospital. They took me away from what could have been. It saved me from something that ruined my life. This knowledge turned out to be very useful. I was glad he said that, but I didn't want to show it, so I just smiled and said, I told you I'd be happy to help you. Yes, he said with a smile. In the dream, I remember what you said. I have the most beautiful breasts you have ever seen. With that, Rachel stood up and walked over, pulling her shirt over her head to reveal her juicy breasts. She took off her blouse, sat on my lap, and said, My dream was intense because I dreamed that you were sucking my nipples, your nipples pressed against my face. That is, before you fucked me, she continued, and my lips couldn't help but touch ground and grab her nipples. For 15 minutes, my mind was in such confusion as never before in my life. First of all, he didn't want to change Elsbeth. I wanted to suck Rachel's nipples and fuck her. Obviously, someone had to give. I must have been a very weak person because after about 10 minutes of holding Rachel on my lap and sucking her breasts, I stood up and took off my shirt and shorts. She pulled her pants down, revealing her shorts. Naked and shaved. Cat. Then I picked her up and laid her on the large, soft sofa in the living room. I stood behind Rachel, licking her wet pussy and caressing her swollen clit until she came, then carefully inserted my steel-hard cock into her pussy. One penetration, accompanied by her constant moans, was almost enough to make me come, but I gathered all my strength, held back, and started pumping. I didn't last long. It wasn't necessary. After about 2 minutes, I started pounding, grabbed the nipples, squeezed them, and came like a howitzer. She came up to me and jumped up as if she was having an epileptic seizure. Although our sex session was short, we were both sweating. When I finally pulled away, she quickly turned around, kissed me hard on the lips, and moaned, Please take me to bed. No problem, I laughed. I picked her up, practically ran up the stairs, jumping 2 steps at a time, threw her on the bed in the guest room, and with all my manly strength licked her newly smoothed pussy while fucking her greedy man-tits hard. Rachel and I didn't get out of bed for over 2 hours. Finally, we wash off all the sweat and other bodily fluids in the shower and, still naked, call our spouses. Surprisingly, both are unavailable. Elsbeth's sister Eleanor said cryptically, He's been gone all day and I don't know when he'll be back. Eleanor, tell me I called and let me know if her plans change, I said politely, before letting her hold the baby and ending the call. In Rachel's case, she simply said, My husband John didn't respond, so I left him a lovely voicemail, telling him I was spending the rest of the night with my business partner. You and I need to talk, don't? Sure, Blake? Yeah, we need to talk about how many orgasms we can have in the morning, I moaned. You know, I have to work in the morning, he said, laughing. Yes, but your job tonight is to make me more sexually satisfied than ever. As we fell asleep in each other's arms, I realized that if she were as good at her job as she was at giving me sexual pleasure, she could become the best businesswoman in the world. Rachel left her hotel room Monday morning, loaded all her clothes into her rental car, and arrived at my house around 6 p.m. after an afternoon meeting. I gave her the remote control for our 3-car garage. She pulled into the parking lot, carried the suitcases to my house, and went up to the other guest room where we slept the night before. I came home half an hour later, and she was in the kitchen preparing a snack, wearing only an apron and high heels. She became my snack because of my admiration for her breasts and pussy. My relationship with Rachel surprised me. It's not just about perfect breasts and a tight, muscular pussy. There's something strange that I can't explain. Stay overnight Monday through Thursday. Before returning home on Tuesday, I drove into a dangerous part of town, changed clothes, went into a phone booth 2 blocks from the car, made sure there were no cameras, checked, grabbed my gloves, and put my finger to clean the phone, region. He called the authorities, told them where the serial rapist's body could be found, and then hung up. After my call, rumors spread quickly. Authorities reportedly quickly found the body and carried out urgent DNA tests. On Thursday morning, all the city's media, including the main headlines of the morning newspapers, confirmed through DNA tests that the body found was that of a serial rapist. The whole town gasped, and Rachel almost felt dizzy when she read the 2-page article in the newspaper. Friday morning, I drove Rachel to the airport. After saying goodbye to her, she said, "We all need a month to think about it. I've had my head in the clouds for the last week, damn it. It may take me a month to figure everything out. Then I'll call you." "Sounds like a plan," I replied without saying anything else. Although it was the best sexual experience of my life, I needed time to think. I quickly kissed her on the lips, and she disappeared into the airport. Luckily, Elsbeth didn't return home until Sunday afternoon because her penis was worn out and her lips were chapped. When I met Elsbeth at the airport, she looked rested and healthy. From the moment I broke up with Rachel, I gradually began to feel guilty about my relationship with Rachel. If I didn't feel guilty, I'd be a real jerk. But even if I did feel guilty, I know I'd still be a jerk. I was hesitant to tell him, but decided to wait until we talked before making a final decision. That night, Elsbeth repeated her method of inflating dolls during sex, but I didn't care because I was dreaming about sex with Rachel, so I had a really good orgasm. I thought Elsbeth wanted to know why I was sucking and massaging her breasts with more enthusiasm than before, but she didn't say anything. When we said goodbye before work on Monday morning, we both made it clear that we needed to talk that evening. That evening, after finishing the Chinese takeout and putting the dishes in the dishwasher, Elsbeth had a glass of wine and I a can of soda, and we sat on the porch and talked. She got straight to the point. "Blake, I want to tell you two things. The first one confuses me, and the second one, I regret it, although I had to. I don't want our marriage to end, but I worry about why I hurt you. To end your marriage. Wedding." "Are you serious, Elsbeth?" "Yeah, I guess, Blake," he sighed. Then he gathered all his courage and spoke. "I've been confused for the last few months because I slept with another guy twice. He's only here for a few days and I'll never see him again. But I have to tell you because I feel guilty. I don't like him, which is obviously wrong, and he doesn't like people like you at all. I was so upset that you were out of town that I fucked him in his hotel room 2 nights in a row. I attribute my recent weight loss to my experience." She looked at me with sad eyes. I just looked back. If it weren't for my connection with Rachel, I would have panicked. Instead, I let the powder dry. I think Elsbeth was surprised that I didn't attack her. After a delay of about a minute, with the expected fireworks still going on, I nervously asked, "What else?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I think I can convince you to forgive me for what I just said. I don't know if you can forgive me for what I'm about to say, but I really don't have a choice. For the last few years, I have been crazy about the idea of having children. I just couldn't do it. And to make sure they couldn't convince me otherwise, I had outpatient surgery to make sure I wasn't pregnant. It was on this trip that I visited some of the sisters. Once again, I experienced Elsbeth's unpredictable reaction. The first thought that came to my mind was, I wonder if Rachel is having my baby. Will I be able to suck her juicy melons while she is breastfeeding? This idea really scares me. Shaking my head, a more traditional thought occurred to me, although with less anger than I expected. Yes, how did it go? Today I finally want to talk to you about the fact that it is time to take care of your children. Otherwise, I decided, it was all over between us. So you answered my question. It's all over between us. I'm filing for divorce this week. Elsbeth began to cry for no apparent reason. Why are you crying? They must have known this would be the end for us. I can survive your date, but I will not agree to give up the child, even if we have always agreed on this.
I still hope this doesn't happen, but combined with my betrayal, I can't blame you. Should I immediately look for another apartment, or will you move? And again, I felt strange. Oh God, no, I'm not going to stop now, and I'm not asking you to stop. You were great when we made love, except the last few times when you looked like a blow-up doll. I'm so excited. I didn't tell him that Rachel made me like this. I will fuck you until I break up with you or find something better. Take off your blouse, Elsbeth expressed surprise for several minutes. I don't remember exactly what happened. I didn't pay much attention to it. For some reason, my cock was welcoming me, and all I could think about was pretending to be Rachel's pussy and making her pussy give in. I remember her asking, "What?" or "What are you doing?" a couple of times, but that's all. I tore off all the rest of her clothes and swept what was left off the kitchen table. Luckily, it was only a fragile object. And while Elsbeth lay face up on the table, I sucked on her breasts, which moved with her movements. The cock was moving in and out of her pussy at 60 miles per hour. Given the intensity of my movements, I was by no means a blow-up doll. She writhed, her pussy throbbed and screamed loudly. I thought about Rachel as he squirted large amounts of cum into my pussy, and it felt wonderful to be her. On Tuesday morning, Elsbeth could barely walk and looked scared, sexually gratified, confused, and humiliated. Leaving without kissing him, I told him, "Today I am going to meet with a divorce lawyer to file for divorce because there are irreconcilable differences. I would prefer that we stay together, at least for now, but if you don't want that, right? I'm not going home tonight or I'll fuck you until I can't stand it anymore." I met with a family law attorney on Tuesday and hired her to draft the divorce papers. Every night when Elsbeth came home, I fucked her hard. On Wednesday evening, I was recovering at home so as not to disturb her at work, but that didn't stop me from fucking her. It was a very strange thing. I knew I couldn't explain it to myself. And from the look on Elsbeth's face when she saw the deer in the headlights on the way home, I knew it bothered her too. It's unfathomable, but just like divorce, we're probably having the best sex we've ever had. Honeymoon. She is no longer an inflatable doll, but a wild cat. Of course, it always helps to think about Rachel when I trust her, but even if I don't, it's okay. Although I wanted to call Rachel almost every day since I left her at the airport, for some reason I didn't. I can't explain it because I was going through a divorce and wanted to see how my relationship with Rachel would develop in the future. Deep down, he wanted her to make the first move. Almost 6 weeks after the breakup, Rachel called me on her cell phone. "Hey Blake, why didn't you call me?" "Hello Raquel, I was waiting for your call. Before I talk to you, I want to make sure that you are really interested in me. If you weren't 6 feet tall and strong as a gorilla, I would think you were weak," he laughed. "Your pussy did," I replied with a smile. "Well, while we're on the phone, I have something to tell you, asshole Blake." "Oh, what's wrong, Rachel, dear?" "You must have surprised me that Sunday when you lured me in and spent the whole day with your cock in my pussy and your lips on my chest, that's all." I was silent for a long time. She was silent on the other end of the line. "How did you find out that you were pregnant?" "I took a blood test yesterday, threw up this morning, and that's it." "Are you sure it was from me?" "I just felt it. Plus, in the week we were together, you injected me with more sperm than my husband has injected in the last year. Finally, my doctor said it was perfect timing. We had sex for the first time about 6 weeks ago. However, I was able to confirm this with a DNA test in just 8 weeks. Why don't you use contraception?" "Because my previous doctor told me that my chances of getting pregnant were very low due to the structure of my uterus and fallopian tubes, and I had sex with John for the last 2 years without birth control and never got pregnant, and then I died. The control medications I took in the early years were contraindicated for me. They made me sick." "What should you do?" "I want you to believe that our connection 6 weeks ago was real, that you wanted to be a stay-at-home dad to our kids, and that we have a wonderful life ahead of us together." I was silent for some time. Then she continued, "I think you forgot how beautiful my breasts and pussy are. I'm sending you an update for your iPhone. After receiving this message, if you want to remember how I feel, call me." A few seconds later, my phone rang. The photo featured shows Rachel smiling and naked. I had to remember how beautiful her breasts and pussy were, and how hard my cock was. Then I remembered my dream and called her. "Do you like this photo?" That's how he answered the call. "You know what I want," I replied. "I have a question." She smiled. "I already have the answer. If you are breastfeeding, can I still have access to your breasts?" "If I can't produce enough milk for both of us." "I've got one more question. When can I come?" "I told John I was getting a divorce as soon as I found out I was pregnant. This weekend I moved into an apartment. You can help me move here on Friday and fuck your son's mother until see you on Sunday." "Where should I go?" After that, things went faster. Rachel was more interested in moving to my city than I was to hers. So 2 months after that phone call, we were living in a small house in a nearby suburb. She left her job because of good recommendations and began looking for a new job after giving birth. At week 9, we took a DNA test on our unborn daughter, and neither of us were surprised that she was my daughter. 4 months later, I got divorced. Elsbeth cooperated. We split everything equally, including the sale of our house. Since we both had good incomes, neither of us suffered financially. Rachel's husband fought for divorce until he took a DNA test and was acquitted. They also share everything 50-50. We are approaching our 10th wedding anniversary and Rachel's 40th birthday. She and I have 3 children, a dog and a rabbit. I was damn happy. She was not at all worried about her 40th birthday and was looking forward to the celebration I had organized for her, in which our children and the children of all adult guests would participate. Even though Rachel had nursed 3 children, she still had the best breasts I had ever seen, And not a day went by that I didn't suck on them for at least a few minutes.